Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Wanted to have a chat with you regarding social engineering, also known as influencers, sort of kind of what Hollywood's all about, the creation of celebrity status, taking ordinary people that perhaps you wouldn't even notice when you're walking down the street, and then turning them into huge movie stars, television stars, musical artists, great, talented artistes. Could be an opera star. Typically in America, we like to emphasize the sporting, heroic, championship leader that the men want to emulate and the women all want to date, or create another Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley had a lot of charisma. Men liked him, women loved him. He had a great voice, good looks. That kind of thing. Now, it's hard to duplicate or replicate Elvis Presley. So you go with the next best thing, right? And then you stratify your celebrities throughout every nook and cranny. At least historically, that's what we've done. As we have learned from the COVID operation, with the shelter in place and the masking, that's going to be sort of the end of the live concerts and the idea of going to see live music. I mean, who really wants to go to the opera now, right? I mean, it's creepy. So everyone's been so psyched out through the PSYOPS, the psychological warfare element, the fear mongering, the fear porn. Okay? The deadly common cold coronavirus is going to kill you. If you believe that. If you don't believe it, then the PSYOPS doesn't work. Other than the fact that you notice your neighbors seem to act peculiar. That can affect you. The fact that other people believe in things that you don't believe in, like wearing a face mask in a car with the windows rolled up, by yourself alone, driving around, running errands. That's very disturbing. And I have people in my neighborhood that practice that. So, it means they're mentally ill. That means for me to give them distance, because I don't want their cooties to rub off on me. Of course, I think there's not a big chance that's going to happen, right? So, not on this channel. Not if you're subscribing to my channel. All right, so I want to give you some specific examples over my lifetime. And for your younger viewers, perhaps you won't recognize these names. And, unfortunately, I don't know the names of the young 20-something, actors and singers that you would relate more to people, younger, in their 20s and 30s. I that's kind of a flaw that I have. If you're interested, if you're 18 years old, because, YouTube don't permit my videos to go out to anybody under 18 years old. So I'm already restricted. But here's what people. The only way you can really communicate with anything remotely close to the truth is that you have to avoid certain vocabulary words, or the artificial intelligence will delete me without notice, or I will get a community strike, in which case I go bye-bye for 72 hours or permanently, because I already have one strike. And I think, 3 strikes and you're out. So you should know that the larger your audience gets, or the greater number of subscribers that you get, that your monitoring, your surveillance is increased. Because as long as you can have a small audience, I don't think that the invisible hand is very concerned about you. But if you get up to Joe Rogan size audiences or Howard Stern size audiences, which are huge, in the millions, in the tens of millions, then you're going to be turned into mainstream media. You're going to be as close to mainstream media as it gets, because you're not going to have those guys go against the narrative, or they'll have their plugs pulled, and then their income will go to zero. they'll have to go out and get like a regular job. I mean, I'm assuming they've saved their money, but it's possible their bankers will prohibit them from withdrawing their money. So they may end up having to work at an Ace Hardware store. They're not going to work at a Five and Dime because there's no Five and Dimes anymore. It'll have to be a corporate chain to employ a person like Howard Stern, if he's even employable, because I'm not really clear on what his skill sets are. All right, so I think Joe Rogan could get a job in a variety of different areas. However, he needs to mind his P's and Q's on his Joe Rogan show, and he's not going to go anywhere near unrooting, the Sharon Tate murder. He's not going to go anywhere near that, okay? He had Tom O'Neill on. That was a nice misdirection. They never really got into any of the nitty-gritties. Didn't discuss the crime scenes. Didn't discuss the actual murderers. Tom O'Neill believes that Charlie Manson deserves to be in prison. Maybe we should switch positions and put Tom O'Neill in the county jail for a while, see how he feels about being wrongly accused of a crime. See if maybe he cuts Charlie Manson a little more slack. Now, Charlie's died, so we can't really... We'll use Charlie Watson. How's that? He's innocent. Charlie Watson's innocent. He didn't kill anybody. He's been in prison for 53 years. And he's innocent. So maybe you switch out with him. Switch places with him. Then we can do a jailhouse interview, and I suppose we'll have to pay you. I'm sure you're not going to do interviews for free, right? All right. Well, anyway, the bigger your audience, the greater your subscribers, the less truth you're going to be permitted to tell. Or else. Now, in the old days, or else meant a car accident, a head-on car accident. It meant a suicide, meant a plastic bag over your head. It could mean a pillowcase over your head with a lamp cord wrapped around, like Tom Coomer did, like Lino LaBianca did, like Rosemary LaBianca did. They had pillowcases over their heads with the lamp cord wrapped around. Now, Tom Coomer had a nylon rope wrapped around, and I'm here that it was a pillowcase, and then I've heard that it was a towel. The point is, he had something put over his face, and he had a nylon rope wrapped around his neck at least 3 times. So those are suicides, right? Or whatever. They're cutlery accidents, if you listen to the mainstream media. They're kitchen cutlery accidents where the kitchen cutlery was never discovered. Or it was a military M7 bayonet from a NATO soldier, and that also went missing and was never discovered either. And of course, we're talking about at least a dozen bayonets. We're not talking about 1 or 2 or 3. We're talking about, a dozen. Or a baker's dozen, 13. I'm going to give you some examples, and I guess I go and... Well, I want to skip around a little bit. Today, we had Anne Hayes. She was a socially engineered, constructed, cut-out Hollywood actress that started in soap operas. And then they moved her into having a relationship with Ellen DeGeneres, a comedian who was starting to get on television. And so you had 2 television contracted studio people in a relationship, quote unquote. Because I don't know if it was real or not. I mean, they're both actresses, right? So are they getting paid? Probably. And maybe that was a 3-year gig. Maybe it was a 3-year contract. Sharon Tate signed a 7-year contract with Filmways, Inc. Sharon Tate was being groomed to be a television and film actress, social engineer, influencer. Because, see, if you're beautiful and the wardrobe people doll you up in the most mod and contemporary, beautiful clothes and outfits for your public appearances, and we bring in CIA photographers to do photo shoots with you on a regular basis, and you appear in Playboy magazine, and you have nude pictures appearing in Esquire magazine, and you do interviews with Hugh Hefner at the Playboy Mansion, and if you have a wedding reception, aka cocktail party for 2 hours in London, England, at the Playboy Club, where you all get booted out probably by 7 o'clock so that the regular Playboy Club members on a Friday night can come and use the club. And you don't want a bunch of, British intelligence spooks, there. You want to get them out. So you have the cocktail party from, 4 o'clock to 6, and then it lingers for, let's say, 30 minutes, and then you have the regular London Playboy Club guests come. Because it's Friday. Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski allegedly got married on a Friday, which is a work day. You're not going to get Joan Collins and Agnes Moorehead and Lawrence Harvey and the welterweight champion from Chelsea to appear at a wedding reception on a Friday afternoon in busy downtown London, unless one, you pay them, you got to be paid, and two, you got to promise that they can be out of there by 6 o'clock. They're just there for the photo shoots and a couple of glasses of champagne, and they're gone. I don't even think they have to stick around for the cake ceremony, the cake cutting. Anyway, what I'm telling you is that fake marriages require fake receptions where your parents are not included. And Sharon Tate's parents were not included. And the guests at her party, as far as I can tell, she knew very few of them. She had a co-star there from America who was in Valley of the Dolls. So she knew her. I don't think they were very close friends. I heard they didn't get along. But, she was cast. They were both casted for this event, and I'm sure they both got paid. And I know Sharon Tate got paid. And then Michael Caine was there. So he's an actor, British actor, and appeared in Austin Powers films and so on and so forth. And Sharon Tate was going to be a celebrity, featured in, Beverly Hillbillies as Janet Trigo, the assistant to the Ms. Jane executive secretary to Milbourne Drysdale, the president of the Beverly Hills Bank of Commerce, residing on Bel Air Road, where Art Linklater lives. And you see the importance of having, a Marilyn Monroe look-alike brown-eyed blonde, which is what Sharon Tate was. She was brown-eyed. 5'6", I think she was a little on the skinny side, 130 pounds, 125 pounds. Pregnant at her death, she was 135 pounds, which is kind of light for 8 months pregnant, in my opinion. But that's what the lab boys said. That's what it said on the medical examination paperwork. It said 5'6", brown eyes, 135 pounds, Sharon Tate. 16 bayonets, puncture wounds between 1 inch to 6 inch deep. 16. Which I think is the fewest amount of anyone. Tom Coomer got 7, and but he got shot with a rifle, so he got a bullet through his stomach. Then when you are attracted to, James Bond, Sean Connery, or Daniel Craig, the latest iteration, or Roger Moore, or these handsome, successful Elvis Presley, manly men that always get the woman and they always get the villain and they always escape dangerous situations, like Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, these wonder boys that came into success in their 20s early. You wonder, how do they do it? How do they overshoot all the 30 and 40-year-olds? How do these whiz kids come into Hollywood and get Warner Brothers to give them hundreds of thousands of dollars? How does Francis Ford Coppola at age 29 get to be the director for The Godfather, an epic film of our time, where the CIA is hiding in plain view? The 5 families of New York all work for the CIA. They're in illegal activities involving alcohol and then drugs, the drug business. That was why Vito Corleone was whacked, right? Because he was opposed to the drug business, which the CIA wants the drug business. So they had to whack Vito Don Corleone, right? And there's a message there. I mean, I realize most people don't understand the message. They just think those crazy Sicilians are, running amok without a banker. But I'm assuring you, they got a banker. And it's not just Michele Sindona. To be specific, National Franklin Bank in Long Island. Besides him, he's a real life Sicilian banker who went to the University of Messina, who got whacked in a women's prison at age 66. The old cyanide cappuccino trick. That was his last gasp. A nice cup of cappuccino, and then he went bye-bye. Permanently. He was a Sicilian banker, partners with Roberto Calfi. Roberto Calfi was a Milan northern Italian who, if you want to believe the media, they tell you, the people that tell you that Anne Heche died in a fiery car crash and may have had her sternum, damaged, and maybe that's what did her in. And she's an alcoholic, and she's on the ecstasy drug, and she's got a spaceship, and we're going to donate her organs, even though we think that for 22 years she's been a raging alcoholic. But we're going to donate those organs anyway. And then Roberto Calfi is hanging from an orange rope with a love knot underneath the Blackfriars Bridge, facing the financial center of London, England, with 12 pounds of concrete bricks in his pocket. And the media called that a suicide. 62-year-old man. There's no walkways under the bridge. His rope is not attached to the railing of the bridge. It's underneath the bridge, on the center of the bridge. So you need a boat. He was hoisted up from a boat. So it's a wackadoodle suicide, just like Jerzy Kaczynski, the Polish Jew who amazingly graduated from Columbia University and then became a screenwriter and a brilliant man who wrote for Peter Sellers and Being There. Or perhaps he was a fake scriptwriter and a fake literary person who happened to be assigned to the Gotham Book Mart, where he was put together with Abigail Folger, Roman Polanski, and of course his old chum from Poland, Wojciech Frykowski. But what I'm telling you is, if you're known on television, radio, newspapers, or modeling, and the public has a feeling that they know you, even though they do not know you. And so when you give your opinion, when you're interviewed with all these many publicity interviews that you have over your career, people invariably ask about current events, like, what do you think about this COVID thing? What do you think about masking? What do you think about the vax? What do you think about the Vietnam War? What do you think about social injustice? They even have Hollywood music focused on social injustice. That was in the 60s. And you can go way, way back. And you have Jesuit priests talking about social justice in the 1800s. After the French Revolution, we're talking about social justice. Yes, we are. And so today, in 2022, we have social justice joining forces with critical race theory or critical religion theory. We actually have critical social justice, which is CSJ, as opposed to CRT, which is the acronym alphabet soup. SRI, right? Stanford Research Institute. That's what that means. Or it could mean surveillance, research, intelligence, whatever. Alphabet soup. That's what I love about acronyms. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Ask me about the CORDS program, Operation Phoenix, Operation Gladio, which appear to be in force today, in the here and now. All right, I'm going to give you some examples. So there's fake book authors. Guess what? They're social engineers too, because if you buy their book and you believe what they write in their book, which is usually a pack of lies, then they've influenced you to believe in a pack of lies. So the first one I'm going to go back to is Kurt Gentry. Kurt Gentry, who passed away recently, a few years ago. He was in San Francisco. Anyway, he wrote 3 CIA books that I know about. He wrote over a dozen books. And since he appears to be in the good graces of the clandestine service CIA, I'm assuming they gave him other work to do. But I don't know, because I haven't drilled into him that deeply, and most of it's top secret. But he wrote the book on Francis Gary Powers' Overflight. The book is entitled Overflight. Francis Gary Powers, Operation Overflight. The U-2 spy pilot tells his story for the first time with Kurt Gentry. Well, let me tell you what that means. Gary Powers had nothing to do with this book. I think Gary Powers is a highly intelligent, extremely talented fighter pilot who was turned into a reconnaissance pilot for the CIA, because he was a fighter pilot with the United States Air Force, and he was a colonel. And he was 26, 27 years old. He was fast-tracked, super successful, and he's assigned to Lockheed. And Lockheed is code for CIA, where he flew the state-of-the-art U-2 spy plane. And he was doing that in the 1950s, okay? Before anyone even knew this plane existed. And he's flying it at 80 to 90,000 feet, which is much higher than they admitted at the time. They said 55,000, 60,000. Anyway, it's all poppycock because they never tell the truth, right? Then they invented this story that Gary Powers was going to fly from Pakistan, where the air base where Osama bin Laden was living for 13 years, which is a CIA air base in Pakistan. See, the problem, people, is we had this thing called the Cold War, and Dwight Eisenhower and Nikita Khrushchev and the Chinese and all the other countries in the world, NATO and non-NATO allied, wanted to have a crusade for peace in Paris scheduled for May 1960. About May 14th, I believe, be a couple-week peace conference where they would sign some treaties for anti-proliferation agreements against nuclear weapons. That was sort of the idea. And of course, our friends in the controllers of the world, which would be the banks and their clandestine service partners, they wanted to nix that crusade for peace, or go ahead and have it, but just have nothing come of it. In other words, torpedo it. And that was the idea. And then they hatched a plan which involved Francis Gary Powers, who took off on May 1st, 1960, which is May Day. It's a national holiday in Russia. And, it's kind of a hilarious thing because obviously the Russians are well aware of the spy base in Pakistan, and they monitor every single thing that moves off there. It's only like 13 miles from the Russian border. So they have 100% tracking 24/7. So they pick up Gary Powers immediately within 5 minutes of him taking off, and they track him until he gets within, about 150 miles from Moscow, where he runs out, he conks out of gas, and then he has to come down gliding, and where he's then met with at least a dozen MiG fighters, who then escort him to a farmer's field where he successfully lands. That's what really happened. Of course, now you have Tom Hanks, who's missing. He can't argue with me because Tom Hanks hasn't been around in over 2 years. So, sorry, Tom. I'd invite you on the show, but we don't know where you are, Tom. Maybe hang out at the John Frankenheimer estate in the Malibu colony. Maybe that's where you are, right? No one knows where you are, Tom Hanks. Anyway, he does a fake movie about how a surface-to-air missile shot the plane down, which is completely and utterly implausible. Okay? And we know that's true because Gary Powers was not killed. No, he wasn't. And in addition to that, the KGB found over a dozen personal identification items under his seat. That's right. And guess what? That's a violation of CIA policy. I know, because one of my clients was an SR-71 pilot. So you don't bring your driver's license, you don't bring a picture of your wife, you don't bring your lodge card, you don't bring your Air Force credentials, which are, your cover story, because you don't work for the Air Force, you work for CIA, you work for Lockheed. And all these other companies like, what did we call it? Air America, United Air Cargo, all these fake CIA transportation companies that pay you a consulting fee that pay you 9 times more than what you make from the United States Air Force. So you're really highly paid. Gary Powers was very highly paid. My friend was very highly paid. Yeah, at the time, he was one of the highest paid people in the zip code. You'd have to own, like a Caterpillar dealership or a International Harvester franchise to come close to his salary. So Kurt Gentry writes this book, and took a while to write this book, because this book didn't get copyrighted for a while, because I'm sure they had to keep Gary Powers under control. It was copyrighted, by the way, by British intelligence. Isn't that interesting? It was British, London, Warwick Lane, Hodder and Stoughton Limited. I'm assuming that's British intelligence publishing. And it did not get approved for release until 1970. That's a 10-year wait. So, like when the Charlie Manson trial started, this book was released. All right, but at that time, Kurt Gentry was on to a second project, which is called Second in Command, the story of the USS Pueblo. That's a CIA Navy intelligence spy ship, listening devices. In 1968, before the My Lai massacre, before the Tet offensive, I believe it was January 1968, USS Pueblo was spying on the North Koreans with radio and recording surveillance equipment. And the North Koreans were having none of it. So they went and attacked the ship. They gave the commander of the ship a concussion, hence the name Second in Command, because the second in command of the USS Pueblo had to assume the destruction of the records, the destruction of the equipment, before he granted the North Koreans permission to board. So they were busy destroying files of all their spying and espionage. And I don't know if they were 100% successful, because the Koreans were eager to get on board that ship before everything was destroyed. Anyway, all the men were imprisoned, and then they were eventually released. I forget how long, like 9 months or something, that they had to endure a North Korean prison. They were all CIA spies. Everybody knew that. Most of the men, of course, are enlisted men. They're not running the show. Anyway, the media had to deny that, and then Kurt Gentry had to write the cover story on those evil North Koreans because they imprisoned American spies. I should say Navy intelligence spies. They're not really Americans. They're bank spies. They work for the banks. Anyway, so Kurt Gentry is wrapping that manuscript up when he's tapped on the shoulder for Helter Skelter. You know, the book that everybody thinks that Vincent Bugliosi wrote, that book after the Manson convictions, which Vincent Bugliosi had very little to nothing to do with that, by the way. The fifth banana. He's the fifth banana on the case. The case was run in the courtroom by Aaron Stovich. It was managed by Evel Younger, who was the district attorney and former OSS and CIA operative, Evel Younger. Everyone in the office, a lot of people referred to him as Evil Younger, because he's a dangerous man. He had just come off railroading Sirhan, who didn't murder Robert Kennedy, senator of New York. Anyway, Evel Younger was a social engineering, person, not too different than, Gavin Newsom, who's not a movie star and never will be a movie star. At least Arnold Schwarzenegger was a movie star. They do the same job. There's really not a millimeter's worth of difference between Arnold Schwarzenegger or Ronald Reagan or Gavin Newsom or Pete Wilson or Jerry Brown or Jerry Brown's father before him, two Jesuits, two seminarians, Jesuit seminary. All right, so what I'm trying to tell you is that it's all about influencing the public. It's the way, there's the way things are, and then there's the way they're presented. And I can assure you that Vincent Bugliosi had little to nothing to do with any CI script about a race riot, which is CRT, right? Critical race theory is what the thesis is of Helter Skelter, that there was going to be these murders in Beverly Hills, although they kind of skip over the fact that there were two murders in Silver Lake District over in Los Feliz, which don't meet any of the definitions of that. That's a working class neighborhood over there. and then the black man was going to rise up against the rich whitey. The problem is they're not that rich over in Silver Lake. So I mean, they're okay, they're middle class, but they're not upper class like Benedict Canyon, Bel Air Road, Summit Ridge Drive. It's more expensive, right? Everyone's got to have a gardener. There's no sidewalks. They got sidewalks over there on Waverly. That's kind of a key, right? If you don't have sidewalks and you have big 40-foot hedgerows, your real estate should be triple the price. Unless you're 1766 Walgrove, which had 2 ginormous hedgerows. And that house is a teardown. But you watch, they'll rebuild it and it'll be $1.5 million. Wonder who's going to pay for that rebuild. Which insurance company is going to have to argue with the private banker about, hey, come on, you guys did this. This was arson. This was an arson fire. We don't want to cover. We don't want to pay arson rebuilds. I just love to hear because I think the insurance company will be indemnified. I think that a bank's going to pay for that rebuild, but they'll pretend that the insurance company did for public purposes. That's me. You know, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So Kurt Gentry wrote 3 books. He wrote Operation Overflight, which is a complete poppycock story about the Russians shooting down Gary Powers. Did not. Nor would they do that on purpose, because they wouldn't do it by accident and they wouldn't do it on purpose, because you want to get the camera, you want to get the film. Which, by the way, the CIA switched out the camera and there probably wasn't any film in it anyway. So they didn't get that, but they ended up giving a Yale University student and Gary Francis Powers back to the United States in exchange for one of the KGB guys. Then Kurt Gentry writes Second in Command, the fake story of the USS Pueblo, where he tells you what didn't happen. Then, after the Manson conviction, the wrongful Manson conviction, he writes a story called Helter Skelter, where he tries to give you a motive as to why Charlie Manson, with no job, no bank account, no money, no automobile, living in 12 different really nice properties, with free taxi service, free chocolate milk from the Altadena or Arden dairy farm, chocolate milk deliveries with eggs daily, why he would want to murder a brown-eyed blonde Sharon Tate and a Harvard alum, Roman Catholic Abigail Folger, private banker for CIA, and why he'd want to kill a private banker for CIA, Lino LaBianca, who handles the drug business with the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club, which, by the way, implicates the Anne Heche crime scene because that's where the clubhouse was. That's Lino's customer. Lino's customer is 2 miles from where the Anne Heche fiery car crash was. And he's, let me get this straight here. He is about 400 yards from the Richard Glass hair design. The Glass hair design is 0.4 of a mile from one Clubhouse Avenue, the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Clubhouse, where they dealt drugs that belonged to the CIA. And Lino LaBianca laundered the proceeds of those drugs into his family grocery stores and then kicked the money back in the form of vendor payments, thus concealing the sources and uses of the drug money in the greater Los Angeles area. It may have also included the San Fernando Valley with the Satan slaves, but I actually can't prove that. I can show tremendous relationships with numerous people at the Straight Satan's Motorcycle Club, not the least of which is his wife's daughter's fiance, who lives down the hill 5 blocks from him. So, and then he has a whole bunch of them living next door to his mother's house at 3267 Waverly Drive. There's a whole little colony of Satan slave people there. All right, so what I'm trying to tell you is that this Kurt Gentry, he stayed in the shadows and he let Vincent Bugliosi be the fake writer of the book, the fake author. And then he went on, for 45 years pretending to be the expert on the Sharon Tate murder. He knows nothing about the Sharon Tate murder, really. Nothing. Nothing at all. The whole thing was he mostly went and got the donuts and the coffee, and then they let him give the closing arguments. That was his claim to fame. So Aaron Stovich was pulled off the case, literally 4 weeks before it ended. And so everyone forgets all about Aaron Stovich, but he was the one who did Elva Younger's bidding. They didn't trust Vincent Bugliosi to run that trial. They thought he'd screw it up. And I'm sure he would have. Vince Bugliosi was not very mentally stable. And in case you didn't know, he'd been stalking his milkman for the previous 3 years. Since 1966, Vince Bugliosi was mentally disturbed. Very mentally disturbed. He had just started his job at the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. He only had 4.5 years work in that office before the Manson indictment happened. The fake indictment, the phony fake indictment based on bullied suborned perjury. There was no evidence to implicate Charlie Manson or Charles Watson. None. Nothing. Not one scintilla of corroborating evidence. They created the fake evidence to get the indictment. But while Vincent Bugliosi, living in Glendale with his wife Gail, is trying to settle in as a deputy district attorney assistant, while he's doing that, his wife Gail was pregnant and has a baby in 1966 with a son, who they name Vincent Jr., Vince Bugliosi Jr. And if you're out there, Vince, hello. I'm sorry about your father. I know he's passed away, but it is what it is. Your father thought that you didn't belong to him, so he was convinced that Herbert Weisel, your milkman, impregnated your mother, Gail. It's the truth. And he assigned 2 detectives from the Los Angeles County District Attorney Office. How would you like to have the district attorney in your county assign 2 detectives to watch your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then charge that money, the cost of that, to another felony investigation in your office, which I think that's a felony, by the way. If you're miscoding surveillance to another case because you think the milkman impregnated your wife, I'm not kidding. Then he made crank phone calls to the house when he knew Herbert wasn't home to frighten his wife, which he did. Then he kidnapped their son, their little 5-6-year-old son. He picked him up from work in his Volkswagen Bug. Vincent Bugliosi in a Bug. The Bug driving a Bug. Vincent Bugliosi driving a Volkswagen Bug, picking up Herbert Weisel's son from school, elementary school, and then taking him for ice cream and to go buy toys, and then driving him back home and dropping him off and waving to the milkman's mother as he drives away, around 6 p.m. So his mother was panicking because her son had been kidnapped. And there's more, and I'm not going to go into it here. There's more harassment from Vince Bugliosi. Anyway, he paid him $100 and promised never to do it anymore after Herbert got his brother-in-law to threaten Vince to knock it off. So he knocked it off for a while. Then we had the Manson mendacity fake trial. And then Vincent Bugliosi was elevated to a hero status, that he got these terrible people who didn't kill Sharon Tate and got them the gas chamber. All by himself. No mention of Aaron Stovich. No mention of Elva Younger, who are 2 supervisors of Vincent. They just let, Vince take all the credit. So then Elva Younger goes on to work with Ronald Reagan as the Attorney General of the state of California. So that leaves a vacancy in the Los Angeles DA's office. So Vince, because his head explodes so big because he's such a great hero, even though he knows he had nothing to do with that murder case, he got the donuts. That was his claim to fame. He also, made some salacious false statements, which he later was convicted of perjury on, where he lied and said that Charlie Manson wanted to kill Elizabeth Taylor and, let me get this straight, Frank Sinatra, which was false. I mean, Charlie didn't threaten anybody, nor did he kill anyone, nor did he order anyone to kill anyone. But hey, don't let the truth get in the way of a good psyops terrorism. That's what I say. Anyway, so Vince decides to run for district attorney of Los Angeles County since he's so famous now. So then he appears on television and he's in the newspapers with his picture in the paper. And Herbert Stempel recognizes the voice tone and the mannerisms. So does his wife, since she's the one that took the phone calls from Vince Bugliosi. So they hire a lawyer, and they schedule a press conference where they tell the story that Vince Bugliosi harassed and stalked them for 3 years, from 1966 into 1969, and had them followed, and had his employer threatened to give his route information and personnel pay records to the Los Angeles District Attorney, Vincent Bugliosi. This is all unauthorized. He had no authority to do that. He just did it. He had no judge court order. He just assigned those detectives. He just conducted his surveillance. He made those phone calls himself, not from his own phone, of course. He always used some independent phone that you couldn't trace back to Vinny, because Vinny, the milkman stalker, is a criminal, and he knows the criminal techniques. So Vincent Bugliosi then filed a lawsuit against Herbert Weisel for violating their their confidentiality agreement. That Vince Bugliosi required that for his $100 payment back in 1969, and then Herbert Weisel's lawyer countered with, "Oh no, you violated the agreement, because when a reporter asked you if it was true that you stalked the milkman and you denied it, that violates your non-disclosure agreement, because the entire reason that you paid the $100 is because you did, and now we're going to sue you for $100,000." Suing back and forth. Anyway, Vince ended up paying $12,500 in cash to Herbert Weisel. $12,500. I think it was in $100 bills. So it was like really it was very inconvenient. I mean, you could have done a cashier's check, right? Except then you could prove that Vince paid the milkman, and he didn't want to be in a position to say how much money he paid the milkman. $12,500, right, Vince? Well, Gail. And then you should know that Vince also had a mistress who worked at the County of Los Angeles, and she lived in Santa Monica. Anyway, she got pregnant in that relationship with Vince Bugliosi, so he paid her $450 cash and told her to get an abortion. He found a doctor to do it, and Virginia Cardwell is her name. She refused to do it. She was a divorcee, and she was Catholic, and she didn't want to get the divorce. So then Vince drove over to her home, punched her in the nose, broke her nose, slapped her around, punched her in the belly, caused her to have a miscarriage. She went, then he left. I don't know if she had the miscarriage right then, but he helped it along. And then so she went to the Santa Monica Police Department, filed a report against him. They have to follow it up. They make no arrest. There's no prosecution coming from the district attorney, obviously, since Vince works there, and he's the most famous prosecutor in the office, right? He put Charlie Manson into the gas chamber, and he's slapping around his mistress, Virginia Cardwell. So he paid her for dental work, for breaking some teeth. He had to pay for medical bills, and he paid an undisclosed amount of cash in the thousands of dollars to Virginia Cardwell. I don't have all the info on that. Check it out. You can verify it. It's public. It's mostly public. It's hard to find. You're going to get Virginia Cardwell hung up with Virginia Graham, who's a sugar baby prostitute who was used to lie and commit suborn perjury about Susan Atkins. So if you have the word Virginia and Vincent Bugliosi, you'll always get Virginia Graham. We're not interested in Virginia Graham, the sugar baby. You're interested in Virginia Cardwell. That's Cardwell. She's a former employee of Los Angeles County, and she had a miscarriage, and she was assaulted and subject to battery at the hands of Vincent Bugliosi, who was a district attorney in the Los Angeles County office. But Vincent was a social engineer influencer regarding Helter Skelter and the evilness of Charlie Manson for over 40 years. And it's all a lie. It's a complete lie. And then Vincent Bugliosi put his name on a book about Parkland and supporting the Warren Commission, the assassination of John Kennedy. Look, if you're going to hire Vincent Bugliosi to endorse your story, then you know it's not going to be a true story, because Vincent Bugliosi is only associated with mendacities and fake social engineering operations, Operation Chaos, Operation Baloney, Operation Poppycock, purveyor of poppycock. It's an example of, for those people that bought the book. Helter Skelter. Then today, we have George Lucas. He's like a cricket. You don't hear him. He's like a church mouse. You never hear him. What's his opinion on vaccination? What's his opinion on face masking or social distancing? Don't hear anything out of him. He brought us all those great Star Wars things. But before that, when he was 25 and he was still, coming out of USC, in the internship program, Warner Brothers provides $550,000 through Francis Ford Coppola, Warner Brothers, to produce a dystopian film, THX-1138, whereby the 25-year-old George Lucas is going to be a director. It wasn't his first director role, but it was his first well-paid director role. And he's not really qualified to get on the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Laboratory, which is he was allowed access on there, the Department of Energy. He's not allowed to shoot at the University of California, Berkeley in the Lawrence Science Hall. And he's not allowed to close down the Bay Area Rapid Transit Transbay Tube, which requires Bechtel, the general contractor's permission. He's not allowed to close down the Alameda Oakland Posey Tube to the Alameda Naval Air Station, but he did. He's not allowed to use drug addicts that have made 2-year commitments at the Church of Synanon in downtown Oakland with their shaved heads that they look like Hare Krishnas, at the airport asking for money. And he had a bunch of those people in his dystopian film, which featured Donald Palance, the man who brought you Newsbenders, with Robert Duvall, who had to shave his head. Robert Duvall, Tom Grogan, the consigliere for Vito Corleone in The Godfather and Godfather 2. Robert Duvall plays the consigliere. And he's in a George Lucas film with Donald Palance regarding authoritarianism, totalitarianism, grim, black, dark times. But he takes time off in 1969 to go film the Altamont Free concert out by the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory between Tracy and Livermore's Altamont Raceway. It's a great place for car racing and motorcycle racing. And they had the Rolling Stones, they had the Grateful Dead there, they had Neil Young there. I don't know that he played, but he was there. And there was the Jefferson Airplane was there. And 40 Hells Angels were there. And allegedly 300,000 young people were there, which immediately creates a porta potty problem, right? And here's what I'm telling you, that the way that was written up in the media was all poppycock, mendacities, and untrue. They made all kinds of outrageous and false statements, like that the Rolling Stones played for free beer, $500 of free beer. Well, that I know personally that's not true. They were paid cash, and there were only 40 of them. And there is no way 40, SWAT team members could control 300,000 people. And by the way, people, you couldn't get 300,000 people there. Let's say maybe there were 5,000 people to 10,000 people. Okay, really, anything beyond 10,000 is sort of in the absurd category. If you knew that property and it's December 6th, 1969, it's cold, it's windy, do the math on how many porta potties you're going to need. It's a free concert. How are you going to pay for the porta potty? So somebody is sponsoring this event. Someone has to pay rent to the owner of the speedway. And then you have to pay rent to the neighbors who have cows that are grazing. And you don't want your cows near a bunch of people on LSD or drunkenness, like Anne Heche with her ecstasy and her breakup bender. And then Mick Jagger is singing Sympathy for the Devil when Meredith Hunter is stabbed to death at age 18 in front of the stage. And Mick Jagger is singing Sympathy for the Devil, and George Lucas is filming it, or allegedly somebody that's under his supervision is filming it. There's a lot of people want to tell me that George Lucas didn't hold the camera. But what difference does it make? He's in charge. He's the most senior person that would handle a camera. He's directing Warner Brothers, THX 1138. I mean, there's nobody that's more qualified than George Lucas, age 25. Well, actually, there probably are people more qualified. But no one has higher status than George Lucas. He's been chosen. He's going to go on to be famous with Star Wars, which is coming. He's going to own the Luke Skywalker Ranch in Marin County, 4,600 acres. Are you kidding me? That's double the size of the Bohemian Grove. So George Lucas is guaranteed success. And when they get back to the editing room, they make damn sure to switch out Sympathy for the Devil with Under My Thumb, because George Lucas is under somebody's thumb. That came out in a film later called Gimme Shelter. What I'm trying to tell you people is we have these influencers like Mick Jagger, like Grace Slick, like Neil Young, like Bill Graham for a short while. And they lie to you. They look into the camera and they lie. That's what a social engineer is. That's what Sharon Tate would have ended up once they got her more popular. They would have asked her about current events, and she would have read the script and the cue cards that the invisible hand wants them to read. And then you'd buy into it because you like them, or you think they're beautiful, or that they have talent, and that they sing the songs that resonate in your heartstrings and your soul. When these people have no souls, they're soulless. They have to sell their soul to get the job. Don't you realize when you're 21, 22, 23 years old and you come in as a polio survivor from Toronto, Canada, how the hell are you going to get a record contract with Warner Brothers through Atlantic Records? How's that going to work? There's only 20,000 people ahead of you in line. But anyway, that's where these people come from. They don't necessarily come from under a rock. Then I saw a video today about Harrison Ford where he's talking about global warming and there's a problem, and he's all indignant about people don't take global warming seriously. Well, I'm kind of indignant that Harrison Ford didn't mention his opinion about masking and vaccinations, because I think that's much more relevant topic than global warming. Hey, you can solve global warming in a nanosecond. Just tell all the aircraft carriers, ground all the Air Force jets, all the military planes, all the planes transporting drugs into the United States, all the planes transporting human trafficking, ground them. Don't have the aircraft carriers have a whole fleet. Shut it down, and you're going to have a 50% savings of the consumption of energy on this planet. Right? Because the military consumes half of our energy demand. So just get rid of the military and you'll game over. Problem solved. Thank you very much. Send me a couple of $1 million to say thank you to me. I just solved a budget problem. But they won't do it. Lance Armstrong, huge social engineering fraud. Fraud. Everybody knew he was doped. I mean, I knew he was doped from the get-go. Oh, people, I had to endure 13 years of people telling me, that I was jealous, and I have rumors, and I made up lies, and, he still never told the truth. He's on a boatload of drugs that he never mentioned to Oprah. I mean, Oprah just told the drugs that everybody already knew about. There's all kinds of other stuff, Norwegian calf blood, synthetic hemoglobin, how much female fertility hormones do you take? When you're jacking up on testosterone, maybe the question should be directed to Arnold Schwarzenegger, because I'm sure he's qualified to know, because he took a lot of testosterone, which meant he took a lot of girly hormones too. He must have taken the fertility hormones. Otherwise, Arnold would have, a mini unit. So I'm just telling you, it's called luteinization. You got to balance off your hormones. It's not just about narcotics. It's about the hormones, the peptide hormones. Anyway, Timothy Leary, another huge social engineer, liar, liar, pants on fire, who has supposedly a PhD from University of California, Berkeley, achieved department head status at Harvard in the psilocybin unit in the early 60s when Abigail Folger was in attendance at Radcliffe, Harvard. Michael Aquino, with the satanic eyebrows, he's a cutout. He served a tour of duty in Vietnam, and then he went to University of California, Santa Barbara. I think he got a sociology degree or something, and became the head of the Church of Satan, stationed at the Presidio Army Base, which is where Sharon Tate's father was stationed in officer housing there. And Michael Aquino got eventually same rank as Paul Tate, colonel. Michael Aquino looked like he was whacked at age 72. He was shot in the head, so it looked like he was retired from duty. Timothy Leary died like 250 feet from where Abigail Folger was murdered at Cielo Drive, which is really Bella. Timothy Leary died at 10106 Sunbrook Drive, which is one of the Doppelganger twin homes directly below the murder scene, which is code for that it's a military complex of 5 houses. Not just the home where Sharon Tate and Tom Coomer were killed, but there's 4 other houses, and 3 of the houses are on the terrace below. And it's not very far below. It's like 150 feet of elevation. It's about 250, 300 feet of distance to the pool house. We have 3 doggies that are known to bark, but they didn't bark. Anyway, my latest point is that the social engineers are in every sector of our life. They're at church. They could be the leader of your church. They could just be one of the helpers. They're in all our universities. They're in all the elementary schools. They're in the middle schools. They're in, these teachers wearing masks. They are working for the invisible hand. They are traumatizing and conditioning our children into fake, false beliefs to control them so that they're obedient and they will do what they're told. And for the people that are harder cases, they have the neuroscience community, the neuroscience people. They're trying to restructure your brain using drugs and or injectable products or weaponry. They are using all manner of conditioning, from electroshock treatment to what I would call the Wi-Fi mesh, which is a form of electroshock treatment. The things that Albert Laverne used at the Bellevue State Hospital in New York, electroshock treatment plus drugs. What Timothy Leary used, and he's not a doctor, he was a PhD, he's not a medical doctor. Albert Laverne was a medical doctor. Louis Julian West in the Haight-Ashbury, he's a medical doctor. But he could work with Timothy Leary on the medical, pharmaceutical aspects because he was a medical doctor. But you see, it doesn't really matter if you are or you aren't. When you talk about drug testing, they generally don't use medical doctors. They use neuroscientists, they use biological scientists, they use mechanics. They use anyone that will experiment on horses or dogs and then transfer it over to humans. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is you got to be really skeptical because, I'm getting a lot of negative harassment over there at that, place that and I have a small audience, but I blew through the 12,000 views real quick like a bunny rabbit, and then things got real heavy. They delete my comments, they delete my viewer comments, they delete my videos, they have my telemetry data go missing. They took like 6,000 views over a 3-day period, and they disappeared it, said that data is not available. I don't know what that means. In other words, they didn't delete it, but they camouflaged it. So it comes out of my telemetry, so I won't win my next award, which I don't care about. All right, well, that's it for today, folks, is that fake books, Walter Cronkite, you name it. If you see them on television, I don't care if it's Tucker Carlson, and I don't care if it's the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. You know what Ron DeSantis' resume reads, right? Yale University, Harvard Law School, Navy SEALs, which require intelligence training. So you have the governor of Florida who says all the things I like to hear, and he's totally indoctrinated into the CIA, completely. So he's running a honeypot operation. All these suckers that move to Florida, that's going to become a FEMA camp. They're just going to put a barbed wire fence around Florida. And you know what? The weather sucks down there in the summer. It's really bad. So the only people that go there is the New Yorkers who are after, get out of the freezing cold. So they go down there in the wintertime and it's okay. But Texas is the other place. That Texas looks like a FEMA camp to me. They've got a governor saying the right things, but those people are they're honeypots. That's what the lesson was of Timothy Leary and Bill Graham and Abigail Folger's mother, Enos Mejia. They were running a honeypot operation, Midnight Climax, in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, in a Jesuit university, University of San Francisco, St. Ignatius High School, St. Ignatius Parish, St. Agnes Elementary School, and they're running a Catholic indoctrination Jesuit control center run by a PhD in pharmacology, David Smith, from the University of California, San Francisco, and featuring Ken Kesey and Hunter S. Thompson, who's a social engineer. Hunter S. Thompson, he's CIA, he's fake news, fake stories, gonzo journalism, and he's there with Timothy Leary, who got whacked. Well, Timothy Leary's partner, Bill Graham, got whacked. Timothy Leary videotaped the last 30 days of his life, where Oliver Stone came to praise and give tribute to Timothy Leary, and in the home at the Cielo Drive murder scene. So that sort of makes me wonder about Oliver Stone. He must be controlled, else his films won't get distributed. So he can go get financing from whoever, doesn't matter. If you can't get your film into the distribution channel, then it's like you didn't make it. Because believe me, if you ran an Oliver Stone film through my channel, it's not even going to move the meter a millimeter. So anyway, let's hope that I stay small so that I don't have to change my virtue signaling messages, or else I'll get whacked. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.